Hello, I'm Alan, and welcome to today's edition of Alan's Cycling Adventures. I finally got around to recording my final thoughts and reflections from my cross-country cycling trip. If you've been following along on my blog, there's not going to be anything new in this video. But if you haven't, this is a nice conclusion to the series. I thought I would start off with the statistics of the trip. The total distance that I rode was 3,431.14 miles. I had a total elevation gain of 107,642 feet and a total moving time of 229 hours, 58 minutes, and 10 seconds. That actually comes out to 9 days, 13 hours, 58 minutes, and 10 seconds. One thing I had a little bit of fun with each night in the hotel during the trip was I would play around with Google Maps. I'd put as my starting point where we began, Manhattan Beach, California, and I would put as my destination whatever hotel I was at for the night. I would set it to give me cycling directions just to see, what their total miles were and how many hours and eventually days they were saying it was going to take to make that trip. And also I enjoyed watching that line grow longer and longer and longer and including more and more and more of the country. Well, at the end, I did a Google Maps cycling estimate from Manhattan Beach to Revere Beach, and Google Maps estimate said that it would take 11 days, 23 hours. Well, I did it in 9 days, 13 hours, so I beat Google by over 2 days. That's pretty cool. I've got to say, I am really glad I undertook this challenge. I really enjoyed it. It was an amazing experience. I would recommend, if you are thinking of doing it and you have the ability and the means to do so, I would recommend you do so. It's probably the coolest, most amazing thing I've done in my life. And if it isn't, it's certainly the coolest, most amazing thing I've ever done on a bicycle. That's for sure. Just as a book starts off with acknowledgments, I'd like to acknowledge some folks as well. I'd like to, first and foremost, thank the staff of Crossroads Cycling Adventures. Not just the mechanical support, but the logistical support that you guys provided. Making the hotel reservations, making sure that the hotel was ready for us, the food, the rest stops. I could go on and on. You guys were amazing. And of course the mechanical support. I did have some mechanical issues along the way, which you guys took care of promptly and professionally, and I really appreciate that. I wouldn't say that I couldn't have done it without you, because there are plenty of people who have done this sort of thing on their own, self-supported, possibly camping out as they go. I'm not a fan of camping. I got all my camping out of my system as a young man, and so I am not a fan of camping, and I am not a fan of long-distance, self-supported tours. If you're watching this and you are into that stuff, good for you. I'm glad, but it's not for me. And so while you guys, it might be an overstatement to say that you made it all possible, you did make it all possible for me to do this in a way that I could actually enjoy it. So thank you so much to everybody at Crossroads Cycling Adventures. Likewise, thanks to everyone at Jay's Cycle Center in Westfield, New Jersey. That's my local bike shop. I've been going there for years, but in the run-up to this trip, you guys went above and beyond. While I was training, when I had mechanical issues, I would drop my bike off in the morning And most cases, you guys would call me back that afternoon and say, hey, your bike's ready. There were even times where you fixed my bike while I waited. So you guys made it possible for me to get the most out of the training time I had available. I really do appreciate that. I also appreciate you guys packing my bike and assisting me with shipping my bike to California. Along the same lines, thank you to Helen's Cycles in Manhattan Beach, California, for being the shipping destination for my bike and for doing an outstanding job of putting it all back together and getting it back into riding shape at the other end of the shipping journey. I'd like to thank my boss Larry and all the managers at work and everybody at work who made it possible for me to have this much time off from work. I want to thank the human resources staff for working with me. You guys are awesome, and I am so lucky. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank my kids, Zach and Nora. Nora for seeing me off in California. She had that cameo in the video at the start in Manhattan Beach, and she filmed the wheel dip for me in Manhattan Beach. And I'd like to thank Zach. Zach made a cross-country driving trip while I was on my cross-country cycling trip, and he coordinated it with me and coordinated his route with me so that he could actually visit me, not on one of my rest days because he wasn't taking a rest day, but he visited me in Crawfordsville, Indiana, and made that one of his overnight stays. That was awesome. It was great seeing you. We had a great dinner there. Thanks for, coming out. Mostly, I'd like to thank my fiance, Teresa, first of all, for indulging me in this insane adventure that I took on. I remember when we first met and I was telling you that I wanted to do this, you said, wow, that's a lot of time on the bike. You must really like riding your bike. I guess I do. But thank you for indulging me in this. Thank you for visiting me in Champaign, Illinois for one of my rest days. Thank you for driving up to Boston for the finish. And all the time in between. I missed you terribly while I was out on the road. I know you missed me as well. So from now on, let's try to take our vacations together. Regarding my thoughts on this trip, the United States is a big country, a really big country. My son Zach knows this firsthand. As I already mentioned, he's done not one but 2 cross-country driving trips where he drove from New Jersey to California. Zach, imagine instead of driving, imagine doing that on a bicycle under your own power. The rolling hills, the plains, the mountain passes, the deserts, all of it. Yup, it was pretty amazing. That actually brings me to a quote, one of my favorite quotes from a radio personality I used to listen to quite a bit. Some of you might know him. His name's Dave Ramsey. He talks about personal finance and he talks about getting out of debt and what a huge undertaking that is. And one of his famous quotes is, "How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time." Well, for a 3,400 mile journey, I think that quote certainly applies. Regarding the journey, there were some long, hard days on the journey. There were some short, easy days on the journey. There were even 5 rest days. We did average 80 miles per day, not counting the rest days. And of course, when I say there were some short, easy days, I'm not talking about like a 10-mile ride. It all becomes relative. When you're averaging 80 miles a day, all of a sudden a 50-mile ride seems short. In terms of my training. I followed the training plan that Crossroads sent me when I sent in my my registration for the trip. And I think the training plan did a fairly good job of preparing me. But there was no way that any training plan could have completely prepared me for this trip. While I did do several centuries in training, I had days where I strung long rides back to back to back, which I did while working. So I was getting up at like 4 in the morning to go for a bike ride before going into work. Fortunately, I worked second shift, so that made it possible. But it was still pretty hard, getting up before work, doing an 80-mile ride, then showering, shaving, getting dressed, and going to work and working an 8-hour day, getting home, going to bed, getting up the next morning, doing it all over again. But even with that, I will say that it didn't completely prepare me for the day after day after day of long ride after long ride after long ride. Over time, it has a cumulative effect on you. You feel it definitely in your muscles. You feel it in your joints. Even your skin pays a price. I suffered sunburn, saddle sores, etc. If there are any issues that you have with your bike, with your cycling equipment, with anything that you don't know about, it will come up on a trip of this length. Another thing I want to mention is hydration is absolutely crucial on a trip like this. Not just in terms of drinking lots of water, but electrolyte replacement. One of the items that was on the packing list that Crossroads sent us, they recommended, either Gatorade or Noon Sport or, some form of electrolyte replenishment on the bike. But they also had on the list a product from Hammer Nutrition called Endurolites capsules for after the ride. And I thought that was overkill. I didn't think I needed it. But I bought it anyway because it was on the packing list, and I figured, they've done this a few times. They know what they're talking about. So like I said, I thought it was going to be a waste of time and money. It definitely wasn't. During the first week of the trip, I started getting really bad cramps, not so much in my legs, but oddly enough in my hands and forearms. Which made it very difficult for me to write up my notes for my voiceovers for my daily videos. Sometimes I'd have to write with my non-dominant hand just to get through. Oftentimes I would hold the pen a little differently, but I managed to get through it. But during that first week, I thought, I wonder if electrolyte replacement could be, part of the cause of these cramps. I started taking the Endurolites. I would take 2 capsules after a ride if it was, a reasonable ride. If it was a particularly challenging one, sometimes I'd take 4 capsules. Sometimes I may have even taken 6 capsules a few times. But after that first week, the cramps mostly resolved, and so I think that it was definitely not a waste of my money and was well worth it. I actually went through almost an entire bottle of Endurolites over the 7 weeks. Another part of my packing, or of my in my electrolyte replacement strategy, all through training, by the way, was I used Noon Sport tablets. Basically, they're these tablets. You fill your water bottle with water, you drop a tablet in, it effervesces and mixes with the water. And I had a strategy of going through a bottle every 30 miles. In addition to the plain water, I had a Camelback that I would fill with plain water, in addition to the electrolyte replacement, just to replace fluids. It worked well in training. As I mentioned, though, I did get the cramps the first week, and the Endurolights pretty much resolved the cramps completely. My fueling and electrolyte replacement strategy for the ride, I knew that Crossroads supplied gels at the rest stops. I had grown accustomed to the goo gels. They also provided Gatorade at the rest stops as well as plain water. And so my strategy was, or my plan was, I brought some Noon Sport tablets with me, and I brought 2 full boxes of goo gels with me. And my thinking was that the fueling was more important than the electrolytes, and I would use the goo gels over the course of the trip and buy more as I went if necessary. And the electrolyte tablets, the Noon Sport, I would start each day with a Noon Sport, and then over the course of each day's ride I would refill at the rest stops with Gatorade. Well, that idea lasted not even successfully through the first day. The first day's ride, I got to that first sag stop. I had finished my water bottle with Noon Sport. I refilled it with Gatorade, started riding, and quickly discovered that Gatorade is much sweeter than Noon Sport, much sweeter than what I was used to. It got me through that first day's ride, but I also discovered that the water bottle I had brought along for the trip, I don't know if it was the seal around the cap leaked or if it was the drinking spout itself, but over the course of that first day's ride, I ended up with Gatorade all over my hands, all over my gloves, all over my water bottle, my bike. The bike was, and Gatorade gets sticky. Noon Sport doesn't. That's why I hadn't noticed before. But by the end of that ride, my hands were sticky, my gloves were sticky, my bottle was sticky, my bike was sticky. It was just a mess. So starting with the second day, I started just refilling with plain water and adding the Noon Sport and carrying a tube of Noon Sport with me each day, making sure I had enough tablets to get through. And along the trip, I ordered 8 more tubes of Noon Sport and had them shipped to one of the hotels we stayed at along the way. And between the 8 tubes and what I had already brought with me, I had enough to get through. So, like I said, I thought that the fueling strategy was going to be more important than the hydration strategy. What I failed to mention already was the gels that Crossroads provides are made by Goo. So I actually got to taste a lot of different flavors of the gels I already had been using. Ended up using their gels and bringing most of the gels I brought with me back home. In terms of the training, getting back to that, I would say that there are physical and mental aspects to the conditioning. That a trip like this, it's about 80% physical preparation and 20% just wanting to get it done. And I wanted to get it done. Some things, some roadblocks that I came across. During my training, I experienced saddle sores for the very first time in all of the years I've been cycling. So I kind of expected them along the trip. I kind of had at least somewhat strategy for dealing with them. I did evolve that strategy over the course of the trip and adapt it to what worked better for me. But I was expecting saddle sores. What I did not expect was a sore on the top of my left foot. During my training, I was using cycling shoes that I had had for years that had Velcro closures. And my strategy for how tightly I would close my shoes had always been close them as tightly as I can possibly get them so that I don't pull out of the shoes while riding. With Velcro straps, that works well. But one of the Velcro straps started to rip during my training, and so I went to Jay's Cycle Center and bought a new pair of shoes. I ended up going for a pair of shoes with boa closures instead of Velcro closures because I thought that they were pretty cool. And I like them. I like the new shoes a lot. But boa closures apparently let you close the shoes a bit tighter than you can get them with Velcro straps. And they close the shoes by pulling I believe it's a Kevlar wire tight across the outside of the shoe, cinching it all tight. What I did find was that I managed to get one of my shoes too tight sometime during that first week, and one of those wires managed to cut into my foot even through the tongue of the shoe. And by the time I realized the shoe was too tight, it was too late. It had already started to cut my foot. The cut got worse over time. It got all swollen, and it was just not something that I was expecting, especially that early in the trip. What I ended up doing was changing my shoe plan to tightening the right shoe reasonably tight instead of as tight as I could get it. And the left shoe I wore as loose as I could get away with because that sore hurt. And so that was definitely an obstacle I had to overcome. And even with that obstacle, I still rode EFI. EFI is an acronym that Crossroads uses. It stands for every inch. You fill in the blank for the F. When I got my completion certificate and it had the EFI sticker on it, the EFI sticker says every fabulous inch. I always came up with a different word for the F. So you fill in the blank however you want. I will say that I'm not saying that I'm, some superhuman specimen physically or mentally. I was not the only person who had obstacles along the trip. There was even somebody on the trip who picked up a stomach bug at some point. I can't imagine what that must have been like to deal with. That must have been really hard. And he still rode EFI. So good for him. There were a few days along the trip where I did not feel well. I did not feel up to riding. I still rode because I was determined to ride EFI. There were others on the trip who encountered some serious issues. Some of those issues were serious enough. I'm not going to get into specific injuries out of respect for other people's privacy. But there were people who encountered some serious issues that either caused them to abandon the ride or curtail their ride to the point where they couldn't ride every day or they couldn't ride every mile of every day. And so there's certainly an element of luck. It's not entirely, how bad you want it. But I was fortunate in the sense that I did not have any major issues that I couldn't overcome. On a tour of this length, one of the issues that you will face are weather issues. Strong headwinds, rain, cold, even in the summer, heat. And so my recommendation is if you're going to do this, incorporate as much of that as you can into your training. I did incorporate the cold because I started in December, January timeframe and rode all through the winter. I couldn't incorporate the heat because it just wasn't that hot during my training. But when it was raining, I rode. With that said, I will say that we were very lucky weather-wise on this trip. I actually encountered more rain in training than I did on the trip. I think we had 2, maybe 3 days where we encountered rain. And of those 2 or 3 days, we really only got absolutely drenched one of those days over the course of the 7 weeks. So I will say that we were very lucky weather-wise, although we did encounter some crazy headwinds. Training, some of your training is physical, some days your training is mental, some days it's a combination of both. I would say that both are equally important. On a tour of this length, you will encounter mechanical issues. Probably the most frequent mechanical issue we encountered were punctures. I actually had 11 flats over the 7 weeks. I had brought 5 spare tubes with me. I always like to carry at least 2 spare tubes on the bike. I ended up buying 6 tubes from Crossroads. Again, thank you to Crossroads though for making those spare tubes available, as well as selling them to us at your cost. That was really nice. Helped to keep the overall cost of this trip at least somewhat down. Although I guess the cost of 6 tubes isn't going to compare to the rest of the cost, but it's still appreciated. Also, it's appreciated the mechanical support you guys provided over the course of the trip. While I did do most of the work changing most of those flats, you guys did help me out from time to time, and I do appreciate that. In terms of equipment that I brought, or I should say equipment that I wish I had brought, there was one leg of the trip where my GPS completely froze. I've never had that happen before. It has not happened since. Maybe it'll never happen again, but it's a piece of electronic equipment. It can fail. Anyway, it stopped counting up the distance. None of the buttons would do anything. It was just completely frozen. And when I realized less than a mile after it froze that it was frozen, I thought, okay, well, you know, I've got a cue sheet holder. I've got the day's cue sheet in the cue sheet holder. So I pulled over, I strapped the cue sheet to my handlebars. I got ready to get started and realized that I didn't have a good backup for how I was going to measure distance, which is a crucial part of using a cue sheet to navigate. Yes, I could have used my phone, but depending on how early it was in the ride, that might not have been a good solution. Phone batteries don't last as long as cycle computer batteries, and so I ultimately ended up discovering that if you hold the power button in long enough, it eventually forces the computer to turn off, and then I was able to restart it, and it reloaded the route, and the GPS picked up my location, and I was able to continue on. But for a few minutes there, I was a little worried. So one piece of equipment that I would recommend you get if you're going to do this is get some kind of a backup bike computer, preferably one that doesn't use GPS in case it's an issue that affects GPS entirely. They make some nice inexpensive ones that are wired and have a magnetic pickup to count wheel revolutions, and once you set it up, they're fairly accurate. I wish I had one of those. There were people who had those, so that's something I would recommend. Another thing I would recommend is a phone holder for your phone, for your bike. I didn't have one of those, so if I ended up using my phone as a backup, I'm not sure what I would have done. Maybe hold the phone in my hand. Maybe stuffing it in the cue sheet holder might have helped, although I'm not sure if that would have been sufficiently secure. Some equipment that I had with me that I didn't use, but that I'm not necessarily sorry I brought. One of the items on the packing list was a set of spare, not a full set of spare spokes, but like 5 or 6 spokes of each length that you need. So I went to my bike shop and bought the spokes. I even said to my friend there who does the work on my bike, I said, you know, I've never broken a spoke. And he said, and you won't on this trip. And I said, then why do I need the spokes? And he said, because if you didn't bring spare spokes, you would break one or more spokes on this trip, and it would be a trip ender for you. So glad I brought the spare spokes, never used them. One of the items on the list was emergency tire boots. I bought a pack of emergency tire boots, never used them. The majority of the people on our trip never needed them. There was one person on the trip who managed to cut her tire badly enough that she ended up using one of those emergency tire boots. So I'm glad I brought them. I now carry them with me on every ride, just in case. You never know, but I never needed them. My first aid supplies. I had a top tube bag, which had gauze pads and Band-Aids and tape and, you know, all kinds of first aid supplies. Fortunately, I never needed them, but they're something I'm glad I had with me. Crossroads had recommended getting a pair of tweezers to pull wires and things like that out of your tires. Someone had recommended a particular pair of tweezers, which I bought before the trip. After I bought the tweezers, someone else recommended getting a pair of locking forceps, that those give you a little more strength and leverage for pulling stuff out of your tires. So I bought a pair of forceps off of Amazon. Never ended up using the forceps. The tweezers ended up being sufficient. Again, I'm not sorry I bought the forceps. You never know. I might have needed them at some point. The person who recommended them was someone who had done this trip before, and, you know, I know he meant well. I just never needed them. The tweezers were sufficient. One of the items that I brought was a top tube bag. Top tube bag is essential. I could have picked a better one. The one I picked was a little bit too small, so I ended up still carrying most of my tools and my spare tubes in my Camelback. I was bringing the Camelback every day anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. But maybe a slightly larger top tube bag would have been helpful. Also, the way the top tube bag attached to my bike, it had straps that went around the top tube, and it had a strap that went around the headset of my bike. My bike was a Roubaix. Roubaix have a future shock in the headset that basically gives you some shock absorption, but it's covered with a rubber boot to protect it from the elements. And that strap went around the rubber boot, and I guess the combination of the strap being there and the rubber boot moving as I would go over bumps and imperfections in the road caused the rubber boot to tear and expose the shock to the elements. At this point, my bike is still in the shop, so I don't know if they had to replace the future shock or if they just had to replace the boot, but perhaps I shouldn't have tightened the top tube bag quite so much, or gotten one that didn't attach around the future shock. Some other random thoughts. One of the items I started using in training is a chamois cream called chamois butter. That stuff is amazing. Like I said, I never had saddle sores in the years of cycling I've done, but during my training I did get some saddle sores. I started using chamois butter. I used the saddle sores as a guide of where I needed to apply it, and I would apply it to the skin. But then on the trip I got saddle sores again, and the head of Crossroads saw from the way I was standing all the time on the bike, and maybe even the way I was walking. And so she asked me if I had saddle sores, and she asked me if I was using chamois cream, and I said I was. And she said, don't just put it on your skin, put it on the chamois as well. And that proved to be a game changer. That helped to get me through. So, and by the way, I still use chamois butter, even though I will probably never again get a saddle sore. Even if I didn't use it, it does make things a little more comfortable. Crossroads had recommended not just bringing a large tube of chamois cream, but they make these small packets in case you want to carry it with you on the bike and reapply during the course of a ride. So I bought a box of the packets, never used it, never reapplied it once. A good generous application before the ride always got me through the ride. So that was something that was unnecessary. Another random thought, if you get a slow leak is never just a slow leak. It is always going to go flat at some point. So if you discover a slow leak and it happens to be a convenient spot to change the tube, change the tube. Don't wait for it to go flat. We stayed at lots of hotels, obviously. Many of those hotels were chains. In fact, most of them were chains. Some of the chains we stayed at I had never heard of before, never stayed at before, but over the course of the trip I certainly developed my favorites and my least favorites. In terms of favorites, my favorite hotel chain now is Drury Inn and Suites, D-R-U-R-Y. I enjoyed the stays at the Drurys. They were generally very nice hotels. Well, I guess very nice is, relative. It's not a 5-star, first class kind of hotel, but the rooms were clean and spacious and well appointed. And one of the nice things is you get a drink card, and so in addition to a free breakfast, they also had a free dinner buffet, and with the dinner buffet, you got 3 alcoholic beverages. I thought that was a nice touch. My second favorite chain was Holiday Inn Express, for many of the same reasons, although they didn't include dinner and they didn't include drinks, but the rooms were very nice. They even label their pillows, which ones are firm, which ones are soft, which was kind of cool. I actually discovered that I prefer firmer pillows over softer pillows, but that's kind of a non sequitur. My least favorite hotel chain was Best Western. That might have been a pre-existing prejudice that I had because I had had some bad experiences in my past at Best Westerns. We stayed at 2 different kinds. We stayed at Best Western Plus and Best Western Classic. I was never able to figure out what the difference between the Plus and the Classic was. What I will say, though, was that one of the Best Westerns we stayed at was actually pretty nice. One of the Drury Inns we stayed at was pretty not so nice. So just because it's a particular chain doesn't mean that it's going to live up to your expectations of that chain. Another random thought, Crossroads had this poster of a map that they would display in the hotel lobby everywhere we stayed. I took pictures of it at the beginning. I took a few pictures of it over the course of the trip, but not many. And over the course of the trip, they covered it with photographs of us, and they filled in the line of our route as we went across. So I wish I had taken more pictures of that and included those pictures in my daily blog posts. Not that I'll plan to do this again, but if I ever were to do this again, I will take more pictures of that. If you do this with Crossroads, I would recommend you take those pictures. One of the things that I talked about early in my blog was from work we had a fitness challenge, and it was through the month of May, which of course we started this ride on May 5th. So for most of the trip I was in this fitness challenge. They had a individual challenge and a teams challenge. I had joined a team. I also planned to do the individual. Human Resources reached out to me and said that I had to pick. I could do the individual or I could do the team challenge. I couldn't do both because if I did both, I was going to win both, and by an absolutely unfair margin. So I ended up doing the teams challenge because I felt that my teammates had planned on my doing this and were relying on me and counting on me. So I pulled out of the individual challenge. It was actually kind of funny because they didn't remove me from the leaderboard of the individual challenge. But my team did win the team challenge. We absolutely ran away with it, which was kind of fun. A couple other closing thoughts. One of the things that I had planned on for entertainment was streaming services. I already had Amazon Prime Video. I already had Paramount Plus. No, I'm sorry. I had Peacock, which I had subscribed to because of the Tour de France. But in the run-up to this trip, I also subscribed to Netflix and to Paramount Plus, so I could watch my CBS shows, and Netflix because why not? Everybody has Netflix. It turned out to be completely unnecessary. Between all the time that my blog took up and the YouTube videos took up, I had no time to watch TV, or almost none. With that said, even though they took up quite a bit of time, I'm glad that I had the blog and I'm glad that I had the YouTube channel, because even now, in early August, many of my memories have faded. They're not as vivid as they were. And having those videos lets me go back and rewatch and relive the days of this trip. The blog posts let me reread and relive that way. And so I highly recommend, if you're going to do this, at a minimum, you keep a blog. I do at some point plan to have my blog published in a book. I already looked into it. I wrote a lot. It's 2 volumes, it's over 300 pages, and I think it was over $100. So at some point I plan to buy the book form to keep it like as a coffee table book, possibly to gift to my kids. I do highly recommend keeping a blog. For those of you who remember my FedEx saga on the trip, I had forgotten some things in one of the hotel rooms. The short version of the story was I made arrangements to have FedEx pick up the package. First time they went to pick up the package, the hotel told them that they didn't have any package for FedEx, even though it was in the manager's office. So then the next 2 pickup attempts, the driver canceled. I had quite a bit of unhappiness with FedEx's support. I ultimately ended up having to ship the package priority overnight with Saturday delivery, because I had lost so much time just trying to get it picked up that was the only way it was going to be at my destination in time. And so they picked it up on a Friday for overnight Saturday delivery, and then they didn't deliver it Saturday, they didn't deliver it Sunday, they didn't deliver it Monday. We arrived at that city Monday night. They finally delivered it Tuesday late afternoon, and when I went to try to have them make good on the service guarantee, which is if it's even 1 hour, if it's even, I think the guarantee was if it's even 1 minute late, if it's over 1 minute late at its destination, you're entitled to a full refund. Well, that service guarantee also says that the service guarantee can be suspended or withdrawn at any time with or without prior notice for any reason at FedEx's discretion. So it's not a service guarantee at all. I ended up challenging it, or disputing the charge through my bank. My bank reversed the charge and did their investigation. And in the end, my bank had my back and they made the credit permanent and did not give FedEx their money. So I got the last laugh. Thanks, FedEx. You've lost me as a customer for life. Well, that's all I have to say for now. I hope you enjoyed my videos. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts and reflections on the trip. I know I went a little bit longer than I had planned to, but I hope I may have inspired some of you to do this. And so that's all I have to say for now. I do have a surprise in store for you next week. You're going to have to wait till next week to see what videos I have in store for you. And so until next time, stay safe out there.